about the color modulation, and whether the line plays a role in this modulation. A few say that the line is essential for a good elaboration of Cezanne's color image. Others say that every line is a sin against the idea of color modulation. Just like Cezanne himself says, but in practice is unnerved by his work itself. You sometimes see thick lines, but mainly contour lines, first of all the contour line, broken sometimes and represented by several parallel stripes. The broken contour line supports the color modulation itself, suggesting a series of increasingly shortened planes, as if to avoid a definitive line. But the thick line can hardly be explained from the basic idea of Cezanne. At the most, that line serves as a good transitional form between the parallel hatching of its keys and the curvature of the contour shape. In this contrast, the keys stack up as if it were a line. Some see Cezanne's color image as a practice based on a line drawing. The volumes were first set up as characters, after which the color modulation lessons were added at a later stage. One then attaches to the repetition of the line and then shows Cezanne's broken-up compositions through a number of bold lines, very emphatically enhanced diagrams. They are of essential value to them for the line drawing underlying the images. Others want to get off the line in building. Know nothing about the structure in the color modulations. In some later Sainte Victoire performances one sometimes sees an almost ideal application of Cezanne's theories. But the partially protruding contour Working with the utmost care, he is constantly aware that he is always experiencing the decisive moment. From the transition from pure thinking without any spatiality, to pure extension without thinking. The final result of this continuously repeated operation is the applied color modulation. Using Descartes' purely rational concepts, Cezanne saw the material world as a state of extension. A physical extension, in moving and stationary forms, extension, movement and rest. Matter, once set in motion by God, manifests itself not only in Descartes' mechanical worldview. In Cezanne, too, every detail is recorded in a moving form of physical extension. The whole physical event is a constant change of state of the bodies in space. Lichtbahnen are in space. Space consists of bodies. Empty space does not exist. We see these concepts of Descartes' triad in Cezanne's pictorial world. The extent, the movement and the tranquility are easily recognizable in his volume, balance and harmony. Cezanne's great ambition is to resolve the tension between clearly defined volumes and the obscuring properties of the Impressionist atmospheric curtain. His solution: the elimination of atmospheric space. So that with Cezanne the volume of an object is never attached to the surrounding negative space. Nor does he pursue the illusion of a vacuum. Whatever he has to do with people or objects, Cezanne immediately places them on the surface. And without taking into account the space in between. While he was there, where? If a part of, for example, heavenly space manifests itself, he treats this space as an object. A blue object, which he places directly on the surface of the canvas. Result: the space produces a telescopic image. There is no difference between before and after. Rarely is there a dramatic focal point, neither in the grouping of the objects, nor in the colors. That is an intervention in our viewing behavior. That emphasis on the surface, the emphasis on the material aspect of the color areas, above their illusory meaning. The vibration of the canvas due to the effect of one color area on the other and the step-by-step construction of the color areas dominates our view. Those three-dimensional illusions of the bodies, and their state of extension, also cause a movement. A systematically realized build-up of movement, which starts with the first key placed and only comes to rest with the last key, as if in a cycle. Just as God gave the first moving impulse in Descartes' worldview, in Cezanne's conception the painter is the cause of the movement of the tone sequence in the color modulation. In this pictorial world there is a logic of its own, which only listens to the autonomous laws of color. Where the illusion of or a reference to reality is not excluded, but one must focus on these color laws. In 1878 Cezanne breaks away from the application of the traditional linear perspective and follows a purely autonomous perspective. In this lyrical, sentimental space, the term perspective is actually wrong, because Cezanne wants to avoid the idea of a spatial transparency. In favor of an image that remains bound to the surface. He bids farewell to the variants of line perspective most used in France in his time, the great variation in color scheme and lighting by Delacroix, the preference for a clear scheme of the almost sculptural volumes of Ingres, the emphasis of the Impressionists on the effect of light and air on the color and image formation of the material. He lets go of those three. At Poussin, in the 17th century, the human figures in the landscape play an extremely important role. They are a kind of signpost for the direction in which the canvas should be read. But Cezanne's specific landscapes have no human figures. It is a very psychological barrier that Cezanne puts in the way of our view. Different from Poussin's clear view, so that a comparison between the two masters is not always useful. Cezanne's first desire was to transform the Italian Baroque masters and their compositions, intertwined with ingenious movements, into his own melodramatic world. In this way, a still life is detached from the vanitas idea and a possible appetizing pleasure. It is now only a matter of contemplation focused on aesthetics. Also the classic line perspective, which is shown on the flat. Flat wants to give the illusion of a spatial constellation. He exchanges for a new image direction. He wants to bring the surface into harmony with the painted subject, without letting go of the illusion of the flat surface. The desire to attune the head movements in the work to the framing of the canvas is expressed in his color. Nor does he want to sacrifice the image surface to the illusion of the image space. He lets go of the idea of an image arrangement through the classical line perspective, no longer the idea of the converging lines that gather in a vanishing point. But he avoids the tension that now threatens as a result of the disappearance of the flight lines. Materials can be arranged within a smaller image section, with a preference for top view. Through a succession of parallel plans, parallel to the image plane, there is an increasing emphasis on frontality, emphasis on orthogonal lines and reduction of the distance between foreground and background. He also subjects his material to a skeleton of shadow lanes for the main directions. This intervention in the mise-en-scene of his material is supplemented by three elementary geometric figures, namely the cylindrical, cone and spherical shape. These round shapes go hand in hand with the flat image surface, and their mastery creates a tension. Cezanne models the material by converting the objects into a series of color areas, in highly disciplined touches. The series of hues are modulated in a tone progression of light and dark. Attuned to the dominant tone of the work, a harmony between shadow and light tone is thus achieved.